You won't believe what's surfaced after 50 winters. If high-altitude mysteries keep you up at night, subscribe to The Story Beyond the Impact and ring the bell. New, chilling cases every week. They wheeled the fuselage in on a cradle of aluminum and doubt, a long, chalk-white body sweating old ice onto a hangar floor that smelled like kerosene and rain. 50 years is supposed to turn wreckage into history. This one carried its weather in with it. When the doors closed and the sodium lamps warmed, the air stayed cold. Not cool, cold, like the glacier had been a room, and we'd just opened its door. Registration stenciled in a font that went out of fashion with payphones. N732Q. The manifest says it belonged to Skyward 250, a Boeing narrow-body that departed during the Blackout flight. That's what the papers named it because 6 minutes after rotation, an entire eastern seaboard city went dark. Neighborhoods, bridges, the ring of commuter towns, the map blinked blind. The tower lost backup power for 90 seconds and a lifetime of blame. VHF switched to battery. Approach came back on a generator with a voice that had aged 20 years in a minute. By then, the 727 was off frequency and the sky had learned a new hole. They found her last winter, the way we find most answers now, by accident. Two survey techs mapping meltwater on a retreating glacier saw a ruler-straight seam under the snow. The drone sent back aluminum peeking through blue ice, a window like an eye. In the Thor's slow jaw, an airliner that had missed half a century of news was being unswallowed. I am Ava Ree, accident investigator, and I have shaken hands with engines the size of cottages and screws the size of patients. I tell families what happened in the language of loads and angles. Sometimes I tell myself a second story in the quiet between rivets. Today, both languages were going to be hard. The interior smelled like coins and felt. The cabin still wore 1975, ashtrays in armrests, sun-bleached window shades forever at half-mast, safety cards from a world where seat pitch was mercy and Lauren was still a pilot's boast. Frost filmed the panes from the inside. I ran a knuckle along one and flinched. The cold bit like a live wire. We logged the cockpit like a crime scene. Clock on the captain's panel, ZO217Z, altimeters, 31,000 feet, baro set 29.92, gyro horizon caged clean, triple VHF heads at odd splits, 118.7, 121.9, 121.5, as if someone had tried all the prayers at once. ADF card frozen mid-pirouette, needle neither here nor there. The old Doppler panel, this bird had both Doppler and a single Delco Carousel INS, a retrofit, or a smug nav light, and the carousel itself blinked a nav ALN annunciation that should never, ever appear in cruise. You don't align in the sky. In the aisle midway down, a service cart had skated and jammed sideways. The rubber on its casters had cracked like old chocolate. At row 17, someone had scratched a date into the plastic with a key, 8:14. The flight left August 14th, 1975. The city's lights died 6 minutes later. The rumor that grew legs that summer, when the ground goes dark, the sky takes one, suddenly felt like a sentence somebody wrote by listening. The recorders were there, miracles in orange, not modern solid-state boxes, but a Fairchild A100 foil FDR, aluminum strip embossed with pressure and attitude like tiny braille. And a 30-minute magnetic CVR, the old 4-channel loop that swallows its own tail if you're too slow to save it. The glacier had wrapped them in cold and grace. We dried them the way you dry reliquaries, slow heat, desiccant, patience. When the CVR's spools turned under a museum piece capstan, I heard 1975 exhale into a 2025 room. The tape begins with the warm domestic of a climb. Flaps up after takeoff checks. The captain's voice had that unteachable, distant calm. The first officer read power like a metronome. You can hear the whine of 3 JT-8Ds climbing through thin air and every rattle of catering in the aft galley that engineers pretend doesn't exist in the math. The purser makes her first call. We'll start service once the seatbelt sign is off. You can hear ice clack in a coffee carafe. Normal. Human, right? 0211Z, departure gives them 310 and Cameron direct. A city so lit you can read with your eyes closed, glows under them, until it doesn't. It's small at first, a row of sodium dots near a river, fades like a bored thought. The captain notices only because night pilots count lights the way sailors scan foam. That's odd. VHF crinkles, HF pops like a campfire. Solar weather would later be invoked by people who needed words. The purser calls again, a different temperature now. We lost cabin lights for a second, came back. Passengers saw the city go dark. The INS chimes, carousel beep that makes every old pilot's molars vibrate, and the FO says the thing that should never happen in air. Nav light blinked to ALN for a sec. The captain answers the way doctrine does. It can't. All doctrine does at first is choose its adverbs. 0213, Zed. The first oddity is visual. The FO says the stars out his side went wrong. Not vanished, wrong, as if a hand had pressed night closer to the glass. He flashes the landing lights once. Old superstition. You can sometimes see rain you can't see. The beams return to them like they hit velvet 2 inches outside and died. The ADF needle hunts like a dog that forgot what smell is. The RMI compass card twitches and sighs. VORs grow thin. The captain dials a second frequency like changing the subject. Trims feel a little slow. We'll hold 310, he says, until Cameron. You can hear him decide to be the adult in the room. 5 minutes in, cabin calls. Passengers are saying the windows look blacker than black. You can feel the FO's eyes on the glass over the microphones. He says softly, "Horizon's fine." He's checking the attitude like a man touching a wall in the dark. The purser adds a sentence I wrote down just to make sure I wasn't inventing it later. When the lights went out down there, it sounded like the air went out up here. Then the carousel beeps again, and you can hear a finger thump the panel. Nav, ALN, flicker. If you don't speak 1970s avionics, the Delco was a self-contained map in a box, 3 spinning wheels remembering the world by inertia. It doesn't ask to align at 310. If it thinks it needs to, something has confused gravity. 02.17 Zid. The captain tries guard out of superstition. The FO dials 121.5. The tape registers quiet, not silence quiet, the type where the side tone of your own voice sounds like a room with its furniture taken out. And then someone speaks from the wrong place. Not VHF. Not HF, not a radio at all. It's in the side tone path, the soft self-echo every mic gives you. 2 syllables like a directive from a controller without a country. Blackout. The captain does the right thing, distrusts context, trusts instruments. Power, pitch, attitude, he mutters, old catechism. The panel remember their vows. Amps, volts, N1, N2, EPR, all correct. And yet the tape carries the sound of night pressing harder against aluminum, the rattle of a cabin that thinks it got smaller by 1 inch in every direction. In the hangar, I paused the tape and put a hand on the window. The frost on the inside had a pattern to it, like the breath of a sleeping thing. The city lost power 50 years ago. The sky made room for this. Now it sat in my hangar, teaching me a tone of quiet I didn't know I could hear. Down on the concrete, someone's boot squeaked. The ice on the floor cracked its knuckles. Along the length of the fuselage, a line of light took a breath and did not move. I pressed play. You learn the personalities of old CVRs the way mechanics learn the moods of rivets. This one had a warm bottom to it, a wool sweater of tape hiss that made voices live in a place. In that place, 0217Z became forever. The city below went out like a lake that decided to turn its lights off. The grid failure was so broad that the newspapers called it a blackout, capital B, as if you could trademark the absence of light. Pilots who were aloft that night talk about islands of generator light and car headlights making rivers as people tried to be somewhere other than where they were. On the tape, the cockpit becomes a chapel where no one says the obvious. The captain keeps the airplane in its box, pitch, power, heading. He nudges the pitch down a whisper, mark held honest. The FO cross-checks Doppler, VOR, the Delco. Doppler shows drift increasing. The VOR needles thin until they're decorative. The Delco gives a NAV ERR 9.8 nm, and the NAV GALN wink comes back like a bad blink. Carousel's sulking, the FO says, trying on jokes like armor. The captain doesn't laugh. He wants landmarks, and the sky is all metaphor. You hear the cabin widen. That's not a sound. But on tape it becomes one, air taking a different shape around fear. The purser hits the call chime and apologizes to the universe for existing. Sir, passengers report the windows are reflecting nothing, even with the shades up. The FO glances left and describes something I can only write sideways. Light from the cabin returns to them off the glass, as if the outside had moved into the inside by one pane. He flips the landing lights again. The beams come back empty. A child in row 12 sings half a birthday line and stops. VHF is not dead. Wrong. Guard holds only the noise your brain makes into a question mark. HF is a frying pan in snow. An old trick. The FO tries a carrier whistle into 121.5. You can hear the side tone, clear as rain. No return. The controller who answered everyone that night will later, on camera, call it the longest minute of his career. He will not name the minute where his headset filled with the same two syllables the cockpit would record. Blackout. When the Delco interrupts with its insistent beep, the FO does what manuals say to do. Nav update with a radio fix. Only there is no radio. He enters the lat long of a VOR. He can't hear like a man writing his name on fogged glass. Nav quiets, ALN behaves, then peeks out again like a cat checking for hail. We found the FDR foil later. EPR, Alt, IAS, vertical acceleration scratched into a party ribbon of metal. The line for G tells the story of nothing happening with a tone. P098, P1.02, a purr, no shear spikes, no buffet. If you're waiting for the easy beast, the storm, the overspeed, the stall, you won't get it here. That's not what ate them. What ate them had manners. 2.21Z. The purser calls again and breaks my heart into a piece of paper. I can hear the air vent in my ear. She's not wrong. The side tone breathing, the soft ghost your voice makes to itself, has taken on the shape of a room. When the captain speaks, the room breathes him. When the FO coughs, the room keeps it. The air in the lines is being lent a throat. The FO says his attitude is fine in that voice you save for unconvincing truths. He tries to describe an exterior with no depth. It's like the glass grew a second sky. He asks for a turn 10 right, then doesn't execute it, then does, then returns. Not indecision. Vestibular system versus horizon with outside removed. The iron gyros, parents to our glowing IRS today, keep stoic. The human wants a wall to push against. Night refuses to be wall. 0224Z. Something taps the cockpit twice. Not metal fatigue, not hail. The sound is like a knuckle on a window from a room you don't own. In the cabin, a person says, "Excuse me," to dark. The FO, because doctrine says to be physical against the intangible, radios a position report into silence anyway. Skyward 250, flight level 310, estimating Cameron. The Delco responds with a petty beep. The nav ALN light winks once, and then the INS behaves. It shouldn't feel like company. It does. In the hangar, we tested the oxygen masks by reflex. 50-year-old rubber still snapping with that indignity all masks have. The little green oxygen flag popped in its window with the smugness of things that wanted to be useful. I found a passenger mask in row 6, with the clip bent like a hand had tried to decide twice about pulling. No deployment recorded, no pressure loss evident. And yet, everywhere the pattern of frost on the inside of the panes looked like breath tracing the negative of a face. 0228Z. The captain says, "We'll try HF one more time," and it's Catholic. The tape answers with an old cell call chime stuttering like it ran down a stair. The only words come again from the side tone, two syllables like an order the sky does not have the right to give. Blackout. He tries one more thing, because he is what we say he is. Power, pitch, attitude. He slows a whisker, the EPR holds, the G-line stays a poem of normal, and the cabin calms like people do when the voice in front becomes quiet on purpose. 0231Z. The purser whispers. Row 18 says the windows feel cold. On the inside, the FO answers with a joke that fails. Tell them they paid for air conditioning. The captain says nothing. He knows air isn't supposed to touch you that way. He knows cold is a kind of statement. The tape does something I have only heard once before, in a training lab where we fed a single tone into a CVR and asked where it would hide. It foreshadows itself. 4 seconds before the last minute begins, a ghost of the last chime prints through to the magnetic layer ahead. That's a physics thing, print through. The way magnetized tape can whisper to itself in the future if it's pressed in a loop for long enough. Only this loop wasn't long enough. 30 minutes should not print a future 4 seconds early. And yet, in my hangar, I heard tomorrow trying to align with yesterday. 234Z. A bong that belongs to no airline we use now drops into the cabin like a story a grandmother tells. The purser inhales. You can hear the oxygen of the entire room move with her. The Delco, bless its stubbornness, beeps nav with dignity. The FO, and I love him for it, calls out attitude even though no one asked. Wings level. The captain says, soft, we're inside the blackout. Not in a blackout, inside it. Then all the right sounds happen. The JT-8Ds hum their harmonic at cruise. The packs breathe. The cabin whispers that old carpet shh. The FDR makes clean hieroglyphs. And on top of it, from the side tone only, a third word arrives. One no one on the tape says out loud and everyone obeys. Hold. The last 5 seconds of the CVR are a quiet that sits down with you. There's a click, mic keyed and and the tape stops not with a pop, not with a grind, but with a door closing. We recovered 29 minutes, 47 seconds of sound. Everything I've told you lives there, and a little in the print through where sound rehearses its own ending. I wrote the word hold on my pad and found I had underlined it 3 times without meaning to. In the reflection of the cockpit glass, the hangar looked like night. My breath ghosted the pain and stayed for 1 extra blink, as if waiting for a word that would not come. In the aisle, a service cart groaned a millimeter against its brake, as if metal can dream of taxi. The air smelled like coins again. Somewhere in the ductwork, a fan that we hadn't switched on turned once and stopped. I asked the fuselage a question with my palm. Where were you for 50 years? The aluminum said nothing in a tone I recognized as not empty. I can tell you what we will do next. Read the foil, translate the hieroglyphics of G and pitch, pull the INS bay and see what memories a Delco keeps for a half-century. Cut the windows and look at frost patterns like fingerprints. Run EM scans on wiring looms that should not have carried a voice. I can also tell you what I'll do when I'm alone. Listen to the tape again and ask myself if print-through can be a message. Because somewhere between 0217 and 0234 Zulu, an airplane entered a room with no walls and learned a word. And 50 years later, it brought the temperature of that room home. If you were the captain and watched all outside light collapse while your instruments stayed nominal, what would be your first non-checklist action? Alter altitude to a pressure level you trust, call for HF blind, or start a turn back on raw time distance? The A100 foil FDR came back from the lab, rolled like a ribbon of tin confetti, embossed with the hieroglyphs of a normal night. Pressure altitude, a ruler straight, FL310. IAS, a low, smug tremor inside tolerance. Mag heading, nudges a degree right, a degree back, the kind of hand-on autopilot a 727 wears like a tie. Vertical G, 0.981.02, a sighing metronome. If you were hoping for the big teeth, overspeed buffet, a stall chewing the tape, this metal says no. But under a magnifier, the G-trace grows a texture at 0.2 Hz, the tiniest undulation, as if something outside the math were breathing. We pulled the Delco carousel and set it on a bench like a relic. In the 1970s, it was a miracle. A stable platform on gimbals that remembers straightness. We powered it under 400 Hz shop juice. A line came, then nav, and then, without shame, a nav ALN flicker you only ever see on the ground. When we bumped the table 1 millimeter, the platform precessed like it had just felt weight change. There's a service note about false align during sustained non-inertial frames. Engineers put it in for turnbacks and go-arounds. We'd heard it on the tape at 310. The Delco had thought the sky wasn't a place. We cut 2 side windows and slid the panes into cold frames. Frost had formed on the inside in dendrites that all leaned the same way, as if a slow gradient had lived across the cabin for minutes. Under polarized light, the crystals stood like compass needles, pointing nose right, upside glass. Not random. Not dramatic, directional. The metallurgist said pretty and then wrong. Evidence tray, cabin finds, a Timex LED wristwatch from row 9, face clouded with microfissures frozen at 0234. An Instamatic with 6 exposures left. We coaxed the negatives alive in a dark room that smelled like the 20th century. Frames of seatbacks, a tray with a paper cup, faces front lit by cabin lights, and a hole outside of ink. In the last shot, a child has a shade up. The window is a mirror of the aisle, her own lit cheek, yet a faint grid floats on the black, not city lights, too regular. A square lattice like defroster lines where none exist. The lab tech filed it under artifact and then didn't cross it out. Audio next. We traced the old Collins audio system, area mic to CVR, ACP side tone loop at 600 Wh, service interphone bus sleeping behind panels. We injected a 1 kHz test tone, got our friendly sign back, no haunting there. We fed a pink noise wash to chase crosstalk. Nothing. And then, because superstition is just a rough draft of a test plan, we killed the hangar lights and left only the GPU humming. The headsets didn't go silent. They went quiet in the way I now know to fear, and the side tone path breathed without us, blacked out. Everyone in the room pretended it was leakage from a phone. We emptied our pockets, we killed cell repeaters, we pulled the audio integrating amp and put in a dummy. The quiet held its shape. We said nothing. I spent the afternoon with the foil and a ruler, syncing G to the CVR clock. At 0231Z, a 6-second coast to 0.99 G aligns with the purser's line about the windows colder inside. At 0234Z, the Timex time, the G-trace stays a saint, and the CVR prints through its own future chime. Physics explains print through. It doesn't explain why it chose the moment the watch died. At dusk, a floor fan in the hangar coughed a single turn. We hadn't switched it on. The fuselage held its borrowed winter 2 degrees colder than the room. I put my palm to the galley wall and felt something I don't write in reports. A pulse not in time with the GPU's 400 Hz, not with my heart. A slow hold and release you can only hear with skin. I wrote down a question I didn't want to ask out loud. What if the Blackout was not a where, but a room with rules? And what if this airframe learned one word there and brought it home? Hold, like a cough you can't shake. We decided to reanimate a dead bird. External 28 VDC to the 727's ESS DC, 115 VAC 400 Hz to the AC bus. Audio powered through a lab harness, PA-INT up, CVR rolling on a modern capture. No engines, no packs, just a hull with a voice. We kept the hangar dark and the doors cracked to let the real night look in. The old panel flood dimmers made a city of amber squares. The INS on the bench hummed into a line. The ADF loop antenna clicked like a cricket. I donned a headset and keyed in T. My own breath came back as side tone, the small familiar. Behind it, the room we didn't invite took a seat. First prompt, PA chime from mid-cabin, though no one pressed a switch. On the service interphone, the call light flickered and held. In the overhead, a fluorescent tube that should have been retired 30 years ago warmed to life, one end at a time, and then died, like a man remembering a song and losing it. "Run the Delco," I said. The bench tech toggled nav. The unit beeped its carousel chirp. On the cockpit panel, the ALN flag winked once in a room with no gravity change. The audio path, not VHF, not HF, breathed on the side tone like a coat in your lap. "Blackout. Check your injectors," someone said, too loud. We pulled side tone gain to 0. The breath kept talking. In the area mic now, the open ear of the cockpit. We spiked the recorder with tone and got tone. We spiked with silence and got words. Hold. The meteorologist, who'd come to see superstition fail, stared at the INS bench. "You're not moving it," she said to the tech. "No." The nav ALN annunciator flickered anyway, the way it had at FL 310. In the aft galley, a service cart I'd braked hard crept a half-inch and stopped. The floor was level. The room was not. We killed shore power to the hangar to see if we could starve the trick. The emergency egress signs glowed on their own chemistry. The GPU throbbed alone. On the CVR capture, the spectral analysis later would show a 17 Hz hill rising. Same as the cabin recorder we hadn't yet built in 1975. In the headsets, something that wasn't air pushed the noise floor down like a thumb. I stepped into the aisle with a flashlight that felt theatrical in my hand. The carpet gave the soft ship groan old airliners keep. At row 17, the keyed 814 gouge, I lifted a shade. A pane of black looked back and returned my face. For half a breath, the reflection lagged me by a fraction, like I was waving through thick glass. The flashlight beam hit the window and came back short, as if the night outside were closer than the glass. On interphone, the purser station light pulsed twice and steadied. I answered a ghost out of habit. "Cabin to cockpit," I said, "because we are our roles even when no one is cast to play the other side." The door at the far end, the one we had chained, ticked in its frame without moving. Not a knock, a temperature pop, the way a roof remembers sun. Only this was a borrowed winter. The data logger at 3R dropped 2 degrees for 1 minute, then returned like a man who thought better of a second drink. We brought the lights up slow. The breathing in the headsets emptied out, like a tide losing interest. The INS settled on nav and stayed. The PA chime did not repeat. The cart rolled back its half-inch as if embarrassed. When we killed power, the cabin kept its cold as an afterthought. I stood under row 12, under that last photograph's window, and let the dark be just dark again. It isn't. Not really. It has a tone now. Back at the bench, the tech printed the INS fault log, 1 line at a time, dot matrix teeth chewing carbon. 2 entries nobody could own. ALN latch false at 02-17-06Z, the time on the captain's frozen clock, and nav continuity restore at 02-34 on Z. A clock that hadn't run in 5 decades had written the same minutes the tape knew by breath. I signed the day's page and wrote a sentence I'll answer for later. The airframe behaves normally until you ask it the blackout question. Then the room comes back. We can instrument this to the teeth. We will. We can measure the 17 Hertz hill, the temp dip, the nav, ALN tick. But the next step is the one I don't like. We need to give it sky, not flight, but night and an RF quiet field, and see if the word changes. We trucked N732Q to a decommissioned strip 30 miles from town. No tower, no ramp noise, RF quiet enough to hear your own battery chemistry. The moon made the concrete look like paper. We set the 727 on airframe jacks with the mains kissing chocks, nose straight down a runway that hadn't seen flame in 2 administrations. The plan was indecently simple. Give the hull night 400 Hertz on a leash and the questions it was asked in 1975. Power up, AC GPU into the AC bus, TR units feeding 28 VDC, ESS-DC alive. CVR piggyback capture rolling to a modern recorder, PA INT up. Collins audio panel live. The Delco carousel came on at the bench. We strapped its nav head back into the glare shield, a relic reseated at the altar. We set the Delco's clock to 0210Z, typed in the old route, Cammon direct, then a wedge of sky the way paper used to imagine it. The captain's frozen clock in the panel still read 0217 like a dare. We killed every portable light. The runway swallowed us. Inside the cabin, amber floods made a soft city. Ashtrays glinted like fossils. I took the left seat. Giro, bench tech, took the right. Marta ran cabin and audio. Our meteorologist sat at mid-cabin with a tablet full of scorer numbers and doubt. First test, no RF. VHF antennas were terminated into loads. HF whip grounded. We keyed INT and spoke a position report into our own lap. Skyward 250, flight level 310, estimating Cameron. The side tone returned my voice and a room already seated behind it. On the carousel, Nav ALN winked once and settled on Nav like a man putting a book back on the wrong shelf and daring you to notice. Marta lifted a shade at row 12. The window gave our reflection with a bad mirror's lag, a 10th second late, as if light were wading. She flicked her flashlight. The beam came back short, dead 2 handspans outside, as if night were concentrated there. Her breath filmed the pain from the inside. Dendrites began to grow nose right, all leaning the same way the lab slides had shown. Then the 17 hertz hill rose, the bass that isn't sound so much as intent. The spectrum on the recorder showed the bulge lifting. My skin learned it faster. The PA chime answered by itself, exact vintage, a grandmother's doorbell. No one touched the switch. Black out. Not on radios, in the side tone. The soft path that makes a cockpit feel like a room you can keep. The meteorologist whispered to the Delco, "Don't you dare!" And the ALN flag blinked like an eyelid anyway. We tried turn geometry without motion. Giro rolled the heading bug 10 right, then left, then centered. The carousel wrote a small drift as if the platform were precessing against a tiny gravity we could not name. The ADF needle, dead to the world in daytime, woke, sniffed, and pointed nowhere that owns an NDB. Marta called the bearing 315. The meteorologist's tablet put that vector straight through a dead VOR whose transmitters had been scrapped in 1999. The needle held like a finger to lips. The service cart at row 17, its brakes set, moved half an inch and stopped toward the cockpit. The floor-level bubble didn't budge. The room had a slope we didn't. At 0217 by the bench clock, the carousel beeped and winked ALN exactly like the tape. Giro slapped its side, because that's how we talk to things we love and don't believe. Nav returned. The gadfly tone at 17 hertz peaked. The windows deepened to more than black. The cabin air cooled by 2 degrees at 3R, then recovered like a long inhale. I raised the handset and did something I promised myself I wouldn't. I read the 1975 words a dead FO had read to no one. Power, pitch, attitude. The room answered with a 3rd syllable that wasn't in any manual. Hold. No gust shook us. The G-plot from the jackheads murmured one dwao like a lullaby. The feeling tilted anyway. The vestibular lie of a turn you haven't started, the outer ear pleading with a gyroscope. The carousel drew a 0.2 degree right precession. A fluorescent tube in the aft galley warmed one end, flickered, died. The PA chime didn't repeat. The cabin's frost drew its tiny trees all leaning nose right and kept growing. I checked my watch out of habit. Ava 2025 reads 0233. The captain's clock in front of me, still dead at 0217, did not move. It didn't have to. We were being moved to it. When the print-through chime came early on the tape in the lab, I'd thought physics was being cute. On the runway, 4 seconds before the mid-cabin chime sounded for real, I felt it in my teeth and saw the recorder spectrogram right it ahead. Then, right on time, the real chime fell like a coin. "We're inside the blackout," I said without meaning to, borrowing the captain's sentence from a half-century ago. The headset felt colder against my ear. The carousel hummed like a patient animal that had learned a trick it shouldn't. At 02:34, Marta's cheap digital watch froze. Not dead, paused, and then started again 1 second later, as if asked to remember. She showed me the face with a laugh she didn't believe. We shut it down gently. Delco first, then audio, then AC, then DC, the way you close a door that doesn't belong to your house. The runway widened back into night that was only night. The fuselage kept its winter like a souvenir. We came back at 1:50 Z, same strip, colder air, fewer jokes. This time we brought two things. 1975 didn't. A portable far-field RF monitor and a tone generator we could inject into the side tone path with punctual cruelty. My plan, if it dignifies the word, was to answer. Power up. Amber glowed. Delco align, then nav. VHF and HF terminated. CVR capture rolling, PA armed. We let the cabin breathe into mood and left the doors, the world, and our beliefs closed. At 02:10, I keyed INT and read the dead man's line again. Skyward 250, flight level 310, estimating Kamen. The side tone brought the room with it. The 17 Hertz hill climbed like a tide you can explain but can't command. Dendrites grew nose right on window 12L. The ADF needle sniffed 315 and froze. At 02:17, right on schedule, ALN winked. I didn't slap it. I updated it. Obsolete ritual, entering a radio fix no radio could give. The lat long of a VOR the FAA scrapped before some of my students were born. The carousel accepted the lie. Nav stayed. Now we talk, I told the room no one admits exists. I injected a single cycle beep into side tone, 4 seconds early, the same offset the print-through had shown us. The spectrogram wrote my fake chime into the future, and then the real chime arrived on time, sitting down right next to it. 2 coins in the same fountain. The far-field RF monitor drew nothing. Whatever heard us wasn't a tower. Marta at mid-cabin whispered the purser's sentence into the PA handset. Passengers report the windows feel cold on the inside. Her breath fogged the pane in row 12 exactly on inside. The frost trees bent more nose right, as if an answer were being written in crystals. The room sent back its vocabulary. Black, out. We answered with procedure, because that's the only language we own. I spoke in the captain's cadence. Power, pitch, attitude. Giro read the silly old Doppler drift. Numbers, we fed it by hand. The Delco stopped winking ALN. The ADF needle twitched left 2 degrees, then hunted, then returned to 315. The PA chimed without anyone touching it, the grandmother doorbell again, and the print-through came early on our capture again, ink before pen. Try a turn back, the meteorologist said, which is not a thing you do on jacks. Giro rotated the heading bug 180. I slewed the OBS on a dark VOR. The Delco drew yaw like a child pretending to draw a circle. 0.3 deg, 0.5 degree, then home. Outside remained closer than glass. Then I did the impolite thing. I asked, "Where were you for 50 years?" The side tone held its breath and said a new syllable in the same old mouth. Away. It wasn't a frequency. It wasn't an RF ghost. It was a word squatting in the noise floor we had lowered with every power down we could contrive. The Delco beeped, not ALN or NAV, a maintenance self-check ping none of us had commanded. The bench printout rattled. NAV continuity restored 0234 OZ. Marta's watch paused again at 0234, then obeyed time. The PA chimed one last time. And on our spectrogram, the ghost chime wrote 4 seconds early, like a signature from a hand made of tape memory. I keyed INT and said the only counter order I could think of, release. Nothing theatrical happened. The 17 Hertz hill drained away like tide. The dendrites stopped growing, then softened. The ADF needle lost its nerve and sagged to north like a drunk. The Delco sat in nav and behaved like it had never learned to blush. We powered down in reverse. INT, audio, INS, AC, DC, closing a door to a room I cannot chart. The runway widened into ordinary dark. The fuselage kept 1 extra degree of cold because nothing leaves clean. On the way back to the hangar, Marta said, "It heard you." Giro said, "Or we heard ourselves 4 seconds early." The meteorologist said nothing and watched the ridgeline on her tablet like a coastline you don't trust. On my desk I wrote a sentence that will lose me, friends. We did not prove a haunting. We proved a conversation. The interlocutor obeys 3 words and 1 time. Next step is the one I'm afraid of and cannot avoid. Take N732Q to a dark ramp near water, keep her on jacks, roll cameras, and, at 02.1702 34Z, reverse the last logic. Speak away and release before the print through. Watch the frost lean and see if the room gives back depth through the glass. We moved N732Q to a tidal ramp the Navy forgot. Salt smell, pylons like vertebrae, a lighthouse 1 mile off that kept its promises. No tower, no RF chatter, only 400 hertz on a leash and a runway painted by the moon. Jacks under mains, nose chock, doors closed, AC to AC bus, TRs feeding ESS DC. Collins audio alive, CVR capture rolling, the Delco carousel back in its hole, clock set to 0210Z like a superstition we chose on purpose. Marta taped thermistors at 3R3L and a cheap seismometer on the crown rail. The meteorologist watched far-field RF and the sky with the same distrust. At 0214, we killed flashlights. The cabin went to amber mood, ashtrays glinted. A pane at 12L showed our faces with that half-second lag, as if light waded to meet us. I keyed NT and borrowed the FO's voice. Skyward 250, flight level 310, estimating Cameron. The side tone brought its room. The 17 hertz hill rose on the spectrum. PA chime, the grandmother doorbell, fell from nowhere. ALN winked on the Delco at 217 like a reflex. Marta whispered, "Cold on the inside," and dendrites leaned nose right again, compass needles in frost. We flipped the plan. Instead of waiting to be told, I spoke first. Away. Not loud. Into side tone only. The far-field monitor wrote nothing. The Delco didn't argue. The ADF swung to 315 and held like prayer. The seismometer printed a fine-line tremor through the crown, not vibration, breathing. Outside, the glass learned depth for a blink. Stars advanced from the pane, as if the night had been at our elbows and now stepped back. In the lower left corner, impossible, a grid floated beyond black, a faint lattice like old sodium streets seen through rain. The lighthouse blinked its real code. Beneath it, a second blink out of phase, ghost streetlight cadence from a city plan retired in 1975. "Capture," I said, and the camera drank nothing we could prove. The print-through we'd seen in the lab arrived 4 seconds early on our spectrogram again. Tone before tone, coin before drop. The PA chime followed on time, and the frost thickened, leaning harder, nose right. I gave the second word. Release. The 17 hertz tide fell as if someone pulled a plug. Dendrites softened at their tips. The ADF bled away from 315 and sagged north like a tired animal. The Delco stayed nav. The pane returned to mirror only. Our faces rejoined us without lag. We tried timing. At 02/1656, I injected a single cycle beep early. At 02:17C, ALN winked anyway, as if clock and room had made a pact. At 02:33:56, I said release into the noise floor. At 02:34 Zazie, Marta's $12 digital paused 1 count, saluted, and continued. The cabin temp at 3R dipped 2.1 degrees for 58 seconds and eased back like a lung. A service cart at row 17, brakes set hard, rolled 1 inch aft against grade, stopped, and then returned to its chalk like embarrassment had mass. The ADF needle twitched, reconsidered, and chose 315 again. "Say it once more," the meteorologist said, not because she believed, because data requires repetition. I said, "Away." The The pain deepened. Stars stepped back. In the glass, I saw my own mouth late to my voice, and, behind my shoulder where no seat stood, a shape like a headrest resolving from reflection to object and back. Not a person. A seat that the cabin remembered. Enough, Marta breathed. I agreed. You can interview a room. You shouldn't invite it to live with you. We shut down in reverse. The ramp reclaimed its salt and its ordinary. The fuselage held 1 degree of winter longer than physics says aluminum should. The seismometer's last line was a slow hold, release. The Delco printed a fault line that matched 1975 to the minute. We had learned 2 cruel facts. The Blackout obeys time like a religion, and it listens when spoken to in its small vocabulary. Next, we would ask it for something it does not give. Return what it borrowed. We brought gifts a room might understand, a seatbelt webbing labeled 17C, a paper cup stamped with the airline's 1975 logo, and a carousel navigation card for Cameron on brittle plastic. Tokens, not bait. We set them on the carpet at row 17 under the gouged 814. Giro mic'd the PSU with a contact pickup. Marta taped a baro sensor inside the headliner seam. The meteorologist tuned the tide like a violinist tuning A. Power up, amber, quiet, 0210Z on the Delco. At 021656, I gave the single cycle beep early. At 0217J, the ALN eyelid blinked on cue. Frost leaned. The ADF needle found 315. The 17 hertz hill climbed. I said the words in order, steady as checklist. Away. Hold. The pain learned depth. The room sat. The Delco behaved like a pen pressed to paper. Dendrites grew nose-right, denser now, as if the crystals themselves were writing. The contact pickup heard a thrum too low to be machine and too regular to be chance. One more word, the one we hadn't heard it say but needed. Return. Nothing moved. Then the PA chimed without us, the grandmother doorbell, and the frost stopped growing as if a finger had touched glass from the far side. In the pain, a grid brightened faintly, squares walking toward the shoreline where no city lives. The ADF swung a degree off 315, came back, hung undecided like a person at a door. The seatbelt webbing at 17C lifted half an inch and settled, the way fabric answers a hand. The paper cup dented on one side, not crushed, palmed. The carousel card for Cameron curled at the corners like breath had warmed it and then left. Marta whispered, "They're still in time somewhere." I said, "Or the room keeps their shape." We gave it the last word we own. Release. The hill fell. The frost softened. The grid faded. The ADF lost its nerve and pointed north. The Delco wrote its nav continuity line at 0234. Marta's watch paused and paid its toll. The contact pickup recorded a single knock in the crown, like a knuckle on a table, polite. We held our breath and waited 1 more minute. The PSU light over 17C flickered once. The paper cup now had a ring of wet on the carpet, no leak above, no condensation trail, just a circle like a coaster left by someone careful. The new baro sensor up top registered a 0.03 psi dip for 12 seconds, then normal. Enough, I said, but I was lying. The word return had moved something, not debris, context. The pain gave us back a depth that did not match the lighthouse's present. And for 3 breaths I could see deep in the glass a row of windows answering ours, offset by half a century and aligned to us by sorrow. We shut her down like closing a book before the last line. The room let go. The gifts stayed. Cup dented. Webbing relaxed. Card curled. Mundane relics touched by nobody. Back in the hangar, I wrote a card no regulator will accept. Procedure, blackout proving, ground. Do not fly time. Window 02 but 1702 34Z only. Speak away, then hold. Side tone path. Observe frost lean. ADF 315. ALN wink. Speak return. If grid forms or PSU flickers, do not proceed further. Speak release. Confirm 17 hertz hill recedes. Nav continuity at 0234. Log temp dips. Contact knocks. Any object response. Stop. I slept in the office under a coat and woke to my breath hanging a second too long. On the fuselage, Frost printed a word I didn't teach it, tiny, wrecking home. The word on the fuselage, home, lasted until noon, then melted back into aluminum like a blush. We met in the hangar and decided to do the worst good idea, give them a runway. The title strip had portable ALSF-1 bars in a warehouse, salvaged from a decommissioned field. We rigged approach lights down the concrete, sequenced flashes, centerline rabbit strobe. A generator coughed them into a geometry the ocean understood. We aimed a power van, ex-military green scope resurrected, at the center line. Giro wired its speaker into our side tone path. If the room could listen, we could talk in a dialect it knew. Talk down. Gifts returned to row 17, the 17C belt webbing, the paper cup, the Cameron card. Marta chalked a tiny line on the frosted pane so we could see the lean at a glance. The meteorologist plotted Aero 2.1702 34Z like an eclipse. Power up, Amber City, Delco a line, nav, VHF, HF dead-ended, CVR capture rolling. Outside, the ALSF Rabbit waited dark. At 02:16:56, I dropped the single-cycle beep early. At 02:17 nails, ALN winked on cue. The 17 Hertz hill rose. The pain deepened. Stars took a half step back. Dendrites leaned nose right. The ADF glued itself to 315. The PA chimed the grandmother doorbell. I spoke the sequence we'd learned. Away, hold. Then I threw a new switch. Approach lights on. The rabbits stuttered to life down the pavement, white strobes disappearing into salt air. In the glass, the grid bloomed. Faint sodium squares walking toward us from a city plan that hasn't existed in 50 winters. I keyed power and put on my best controller voice. Skyward 250, on course, on glide. The room answered with a breath in side tone. Not words. Consent. Marta read the purser's line we had borrowed to bait reality. Windows cold on the inside. Frost leaned harder. The chalk tick on the pane crawled a millimeter. The 17C webbing lifted half an inch, settled. The cup dimpled, then rounded, a dent released. I gave the word we had feared and rehearsed, return. The ALSF Rabbit ran. The PR tone purred in our headsets. I began talk down like a priest who has decided the ritual matters more than belief. Slightly left, of course. Correcting, on course. Begin descent. On glide. Don't chase. Giro nudged the heading bug in sympathy. The Delco stopped winking ALN and wrote a tiny precession, 0.2 degrees, as if a platform somewhere had leaned into a flare. The seismometer traced a faint hold. Release, hold, 0.3 Hertz, human cadence. I called 100 above, minimums. Continue into a cockpit that had none of those enunciators. In the pane, the ghost grid brightened and bent, as if crossing a shoreline of time. The lighthouse's real blink met a second blink out of phase, and for one beat, the two were one. Flare, I whispered. No right to. The contact pickup in the PSU heard a soft knock, the polite sound of a table acknowledging a hand. The 17 Hertz hills softened, as if weight had moved from air to earth, somewhere we cannot drive to. The PA chimed once more without the switch. On our spectrogram, the print-through still arrived 4 seconds early, the old physics being weirdly faithful. At 02:34 Kiso, Marta's watch froze 1 second, saluted, marched on. The frost stopped growing. The chalk tick held. The pain gave us back the stars at proper distance. I spoke the last word, the room obeys. Release, the hill receded. The ADF needle sagged from 315 to north, like a tired saint. The Delco printed nav continuity at 02:34 Z, like always. The cup left a perfect ring on the carpet and then dried. We killed the rabbit. The ALSF went dark. The runway fell back into ordinary night. Inside, the temperature at 3R rose 1 degree and stayed. I put a palm to the window. No bite. I don't claim we landed an airplane 50 years late. I claim that for 1 minute, the room that took it finished a gesture it had kept in its throat. And I claim the word it left us was not blackout. It was home. The report I wrote has no ghosts. It has measurements. Audio. Persistent 17 Hz hill on side tone during 0217 0234Z. Print through anticipatory chime 4S early. Intelligible words black out, hold, away. Recorded on area mic with RF sources eliminated. ONS. Delco registers ALN latch false at 217 do, nav continuity at 2.34 do, under bench power repeatable. Thermal baro, cabin 3R drops, 2° C during window, headliner DP micro dip 0.03 psi for 12S during return. Kinematics, crown seismometer shows 0.3 Hz breathing, while power torque down conducted. Service cart drift events 1.5 in with level verified. Optics, interior frost dendrites lean nose right. Intermittent grid pattern in pane, coincident with ALSF activation. Camera capture inconclusive. And recommendations that read like contraband. Do not fly the hull. Treat it as evidence, not an airframe. Preserve the time window in ground testing only. Never outside 0217 0234Z. If testing, appoint a single voice. Limit to away, hold, return, release. Do not improvise. Never pursue return without release. If grid strengthens or object responses escalate, stop. Build a public exhibit that tells the truth without teaching the ritual. The museum board asked for story. I gave them sequence. They asked whether we helped them land. I said we finished a sentence. They asked if the blackout took others. I said only what the data would carry. A time, a tone, a vocabulary, a door that opens when you name it. We mounted row 17 into glass, belt 17C, paper cup with the ring, Cammon card curled by no one we can subpoena. The placard reads, recovered 2025 from glacial ice, associated with Skyward 250, presumed lost 1975. Experimental ground tests documented anomalous responses in the 0217-0234Z interval. Interpretations remain under review. It is the bravest non-answer I've ever written. Some nights I go alone. The hangar is only a room again. The fuselage no longer keeps winter, except for a thin rim on the window at 12L that sometimes leans a degree when I'm not looking. I touch the pane and count to 4 and feel nothing, and sometimes feel an echo. I don't say the words. I nod to where the purser would have stood, and to a captain who said inside the blackout, like he was already writing the plaque. On the last page of my notebook, I wrote the only sentence that makes all my languages agree. Inventory complete. Souls unknown. Home acknowledged. I do not know what the blackout is. I know how to let it finish and how to let it go. If you stand at the exhibit and your breath hangs a blink longer at 0234, do not be afraid. Someone finished their approach. That is the only worship we owe the sky. If this gave you chills at 0217 Zulu, like and subscribe to The Story Beyond the Impact, and share with someone who loves aviation mysteries grounded in real systems.